assess that they are up for going into the graduating threshold in the next decade, 10 years. 10 of them. I hope most of them succeed, or all of them succeed. We count on tourism that we have identified as one of the key important factors that would help to propel them over this threshold. So you can see the importance of tourism in the light of the structural change of LDCs. You see, we have been using the theme of structural transformation of LDCs as one of the key themes for this meeting, because we cannot come back and have people like Patricia, who is managing an important organization, to be repeating this message again that things have not improved so much since the last decade. It has not been a lost decade for the LDCs. Growth has been achieved, but growth with no impact on poverty, and growth with no impact on the export dependence on commodities by the LDCs, and growth with no impacts on the debt, the level of indebtedness of the LDC. So we can't have this growth without anything else to be derived from growth. So that's why we are talking about the need to transform structurally the LDCs. And one of the ways to transform the LDCs who have the structural transformation is to be targeting at capacity building. Capacity building, capacity building, capacity building as a first, second, and third priority. Capacity building. How can we achieve capacity building? You should have attended the meeting yesterday afternoon when we discussed, 10 of us, capacity building. In addition to that, last evening, we had a session, the evening session, 6 o'clock, where we did a sort of a launching of a concept note by the cluster. As you can see that as UN is trying to work as one, in order to bypass all the red tapes and cut down on the bureaucratic how would I say, all the leeways and everything, we have established, and Mr. Ban Ki-moon has launched officially the Cluster for Trade and Productive Capacity 3 years ago in Accra at the time of UNCTAD 12 meeting. The cluster has now gone on to become a large unit of 15 UN agencies, including WTO, ITC, UNDP, UNIDO, FAO, us from UNCTAD, and various organizations. So we work in tandem, and we don't have to go every time to the LDCs to repeat our visit, so that you don't have to do anything else except trying to see some of us who come once every week or so many times a year. We have bypassed that so that we can send a team composed of some members of the cluster when we want to do areas of work that would be owned by the country. You determine the program, we program the whole thing, and we send some members of our team to represent us. So the cluster was working like this, and now we've gone from strength to strength. And yesterday we launched this report, which is called Development of Productive Capacity and Trade, the Key to Inclusive and Sustainable Growth. I mention this because I would like to advise you to take a look at this concept note and see what you can do to help the UN system improve on the work of the cluster, because this is what matters. In spite of all these plans of actions and everything else, all this will have to be put into action by all these agencies that are part of the cluster. And in this concept note of development of productive capacity and trade, very important both, productive capacity and trade, we have included all the points of views of all the participating members of the cluster. So one area which has actually been outstanding in this work is the role of the private sector. And this is what you're to discuss. Yesterday we discussed things with the private sector on capacity building. Now you're going to discuss this tourism with the private sector. Private sector, besides capacity building, is another key essential ingredient. Capacity building is not done purely by the state, not by the public sector. Much as we see the role of the state as more assertive, to be more pronounced, to be more leading, but not to be too interventionist, not to be the kind of father knows all and things like that, but to be enabling, to help work with the private sector, to achieve the deals that we're supposed to be closing here in Istanbul, to drive at productive capacity, role of the government, together with role of the private sector. And this concept note deals with that, deals with the issues that we have to develop private sector. And one of the key issues within that private sector thing was the thing that yesterday someone mentioned, but very lightly, but I heard it times and again being mentioned by the LDCs, and we have coped with it in various parts of the world, developing world, which is the informal sector within the private sector. You see, when you talk about private sector, you don't take them as they are, you know, they are the international firms and international hotels or multilateral transnational corporations. They're not. In many LDCs, I would say in most LDCs, the rule of the game is that the operational business sector is based roughly sometimes 80% on the informalities in the sector. No system, no rules, no tax paying even. And whether the government policy touches all these informal businesses, it remains to be seen. But if we cannot get the informal sector to be part of what we are doing, then we fail. Then we fail. Because these are the backbone, these are the SMEs of the LDCs. And in tourism, before I forget, I mentioned to you for tourism, and in some of the emerging countries even. I was in India not so long ago, a couple of years ago, to do the work on tourism and informal sector. Tourism and informal sector. It was actually co-hosted by one of the state governments in India, and I was surprised to see that one of the former royalties, sort of a prince of India from the old days, he was co-hosting it. And this was a tourism promotion, not to deal with you know, the sophistication of tourism this day, which I would come to a little bit further on, but just to make sure that those tour operators, the taxi drivers, and those who booked rooms and tours for the tourists understand what it takes so that tourism can be the kind of thing that we're talking about, to help promote sustainable development, inclusive development, and help promote capacity. We're all talking about sustainable tourism as well. So that was a kind of training that we've been doing in India. In India, you have a huge amount of tourists and huge amount of tour operators that are not even registered anywhere. They just open one small window, one shop, and they book tour, they book boat trips, do all kind of restaurant reservation and everything, connect with the rest of the world, and yet they are not under the regime of the tourism authority of the Indian government. So that was one of the major projects. There is another one, and I don't know whether we would be dealing with some details like this, but in the country of Benin in Africa, it's one of the projects that ITC is working with us at UNCTAD to develop the tourism strategy. And I hope this would deal with the kind of tourism promotion and development that we get all stakeholders to be involved. Now, in the concept note of the cluster of trade and productive capacity that I talked about, besides private sector development, we also said that all sectors, agriculture, industry, and services, governments must have explicit policies to drive forward development in this area, must be guided, must be led by the government, cannot be left to the marketplace. Tourism is one of the key areas. One paragraph has been devoted to this sector in this concept note of the cluster. So you can see that we're not just talking, you know, without any hymn sheets to sing from together. We have a hymn sheet. We have some kind of a text, a concept background that we are going to work together to drive forward some of the areas that would need to be taken care of by the government and by the private sector. And tourism is also in the picture. Now, just to add to what the Deputy Prime Minister has already alluded to with such elucidation and clarity, I have 3 or 4 points, and then I would finish. The first point that I would like to reiterate and emphasize is again the role of the state. Sorry to say this, in spite of the fact that we are talking to the private sector and but first, the role of the state. The state first must understand what is tourism all about. It's not just about earning money, I think, having more revenues and more investment. I think that is missing the point. We now try at UNCTAD to link tourism with something more than that, which we call the creative economy.